All right, you guys, well, let's get out your appendicular skeleton PowerPoint. And we will go over this. Move my camera. Okay. Get moving. Okay, so we've already talked about the axial skeleton. The appendicular skeleton is basically everywhere else that's not basically your head, your spine, and rib cage, or bony thorax, if you will. Okay, so we'll talk about everything else. Composed of 126 bones. We have our limbs, arms, the pectoral girdle, which is like your shoulders, and then the pelvic girdle, so your hip bones. Okay, this gives you a good picture of kind of all that's entailed. So the green is the axial skeleton, remember, and then the yellow is the appendicular skeleton. And I've circled the ones for you on here that you guys need to know, and then we'll talk about them more in detail in a minute. There's the back of the skeleton. Okay, so the pectoral, the shoulder girdle, is what we call it. So it's got two major bones. We have the clavicle, which is your collarbone. And if you guys will, you can feel your collarbone. I'll probably know where it is, but okay. Right up here, it kind of sticks out, usually kind of between your shoulder and your neck, that bone that sticks out in the front. That's your collarbone or clavicle. That's the name for that. And then you have this scapula. Okay, not to be confused with scalpula, not a scalp. We're not going to scalp somebody, but a scapula. Okay, and this is actually your shoulder blade, so it sticks out in the back. These bones allow the upper limb to have, pretty much can move any direction. So the way that these articulated allows for that. In this picture, this is an anterior view, but you can see the clavicles there in the front, and then the scapula is back here. Now the other thing that you guys need to know on here, and you'll see it on whenever we get to the next page, but is the acromion, okay? And the acromion is that top corner of the shoulder blade. And if you guys will feel, you can actually feel the acromion. It's kind of that bone that kind of sticks out on your shoulder. You can kind of feel it up there at the top, okay? So your clavicle, actually, you can kind of follow your clavicle along and it sticks out, and then it kind of directly behind it, if you will, is your shoulder blade. So the acromion is that process at the end of that. So actually you can see it. Okay, here's you a picture of the clavicle kind of taken out of the skeleton. You won't need to know direction-wise like this. You'll just need to know where is the body. And then here's a good picture of the shoulder blade. Okay, so down here, this is a posterior aspect. So this means you're looking from the back. This is looking from the front, what you would see. So you can actually feel all those bones a lot of times kind of right back here behind your shoulder. And then the acromion is just that point that comes out at the end of your shoulder. Okay, so those are the only ones you have to know on here is clavicle, scapula, and then the acromion. Okay, and that's just the process. The acromion is the process. It's not a separate bone. Okay, so bones of the upper limb. So your arms, we have the humerus. Okay, this is like your arm where your bicep and your tricep is. This is your upper arm bone. This is a larger bone. It's a long bone. Most of what we're going to talk about today are long bones. And there's just one of them. Okay. Now the things that you need to know on here, I always remember you can think of it as your humerus because it actually, let's see. It actually makes your funny bone, the distal end of the humerus creates your funny bone in here. So it's humerus, funny bone, humerus, okay? Now you do need to be able to recognize this bone separate from the skeleton. So make sure you study the difference in the humerus and the femur, because those are the two larger bones. They look kind of similar, but the top of them is different. You notice the head of the humerus is very rounded, the whole end of it is, versus the femur, which has that neck on it. It's a little bit wider and so forth. Okay. So on the humerus, the main things you need to know, one is you need to know the humerus itself. Okay, and at the distal end, down here at the bottom, okay, the medial epicondyle, okay, So if you're looking at it, remember medial, talking about anatomical position, medial is always towards the center. So medial is that interior aspect, medial aspect of the humerus. And that's actually your funny bone. Like when you hold your arm out and the inside bone that sticks way out, that hurts, that's the medial epicondyle. An epicondyle, that's just the place in bones where they articulate or where they move. They're usually really smooth to allow for that movement. Okay, then we have the lateral epicondyle, which is on the outer edge of that. Okay, make sure you know, because on the quiz, you'll need to be able to know those, and you may only have this bone. Okay, the head of the humerus is always on the same side as the medial epicondyle. So the head of the humerus is always on the same side as the medial epicondyle. And the lateral would be opposite of that. So medial towards the inside. If you think about how the arm attaches, it makes sense that the medial one is on that same side because that's the head goes inside the shoulder girdle, and then the medial one is on that same side. Okay. The only other thing you need to know on here is the capitulum. Okay. And you can see that right down here. Now the difference in the lateral epicondyle and the capitulum, okay, is going to be which one's anterior and which one is posterior. Okay. So the capitulum is that really rounded edge. Excuse me. Okay, now the forearm has two bones, okay? We have the radius and the ulna. You guys are familiar with these probably. So the ulna, we know this is the more medial bone. So remember, we're talking about medial and lateral. We're always talking about an anatomical position. So the ulna is actually your actual elbow bone, and it's on the pinky side of your forearm, okay? So ulna goes with your pinky finger. It's on that same side, and you can actually follow it, and it actually makes your elbow, okay? And then the radius is on the lateral side or the thumb side. The radius is always on the thumb side, so regardless of what you're doing, okay? Sometimes it's hard to tell because these two bones, the way that they twist, okay, the joint that they make, sometimes it's kind of easy to confuse them because of the way that those two bones move. But just remember, radius is always attached to the thumb side. The ulna is always attached to the pinky side. Now, again, the ulna forms your elbow, or what we think of as your elbow. Okay, so if you look here, the only ones you need to know on here is your olecranon process, which is actually like the hard part of your elbow. Okay, so the pointy part of your elbow, the one that points out the back, that's the olecranon process. It's just a process, it's not a bone itself. Okay, and it's on the ulna. Other ones that are on here is the styloid, and you have the styloid is on both, and you can actually feel these on either side of your wrist. You put your wrist up, either side of your wrist, you can actually feel the styloid processes. One sticks out kind of in the back, and then the one sticks out down from your thumb. Okay, so those are both styloid processes. One is of the ulna, one is the radius. Okay, the rest of the bones of the upper limbs, we have the bones in the hand. The carpals, those are your wrist bones, and there's tons of little ones. And you guys can follow along. Follow along on the skeleton. I want everybody to do that once you're done today. Look at the skeleton and go through each one. I actually have another skeleton in the closet you guys can get out as well. But your carpals are these bones. Okay, all these little bones in the hand. Okay, my suggestion for you on learning these, because you do need to know all of them, okay, is that you just learn them in order. Now, don't learn them in order of these lines, because that's going to get you mixed up, because these lines are like kind of weird. I always learn them in a circle, okay? So I like to start with the pisiform, because the pisiform is really easy to find. Okay, if you guys will look, kind of bend my screen here for a second. Okay, if you guys will bend your hand backwards for a minute, at the end of your hand on the pinky side, you can feel that bone that sticks way out. It's like a, I mean, you can feel it at the back, at the bottom of your hand whenever you pull your hand all the way backwards. Okay, you dorsiflex. Anyway, so that is the PZ form. And to me, I don't know why, that one's easy to remember, PZ form. So if you'll start there and then make your way around, you can actually learn these in order, and that's what I would recommend. So PZ form, hamate, capitate, trapezoid, trapezium, scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum. That's my suggestion. Now, you can do this however you want. In the past, and somebody last year actually made up a mnemonic device for these so that they can remember them. Go for it. And I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. But make sure you don't get your T's mixed up. Make sure you, I would spend a lot of time, you know, looking at those. Again, they're going to be the same on both hands, but you always need to make sure that you learn them according to your fingers in case you're looking at whatever direction. So like your pinky, the PZ form is always on the pinky side if you want to start there. Okay? PZ form, hamate, capitate, trapezoid, trapezium, scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, or triquetral, sometimes you'll hear. Okay, so that's my suggestion on those. Now these are actually the bones of your wrist. And always remember that carpals are wrist bones because that's when you drive a car with your hands or with your wrist. So carpals are wrist bones, tarsals are your ankle bones. And I remember tarsals because I think tar, you know, you walk on tar like roads. So tarsals are ankle bones, carpals are wrist bones. Now, I will not give you credit if you write tarpals or carsals and interchange those words. Make sure you know carpals, wrist, tarsals, ankle. Okay? Now you also need to know the metacarpals, and these are your hand bones that actually make up the hand, like the palm of your hand, if you will. And if you'll notice, they're numbered, and you do need to know the numbers. Okay? So the first metacarpal, is the one that goes to your hand. Now, sometimes this picture can be kind of misleading because these kind of look like finger bones, but they're not. They're actually the bones in your hand, and you can feel them in your hand. Okay, so feel of them and find them. The first one is in your thumb, so that's metacarpal 1. Metacarpal 2 is the one that attaches to your pointer finger. 3 is your middle finger. 4 is the hand part that attaches to your ring finger. And then 5 is your pinky. Okay, so it starts with the thumb, it ends with the pinky. So those are metacarpals. Now phalanges are all of your finger bones and your toes. They're all called phalanges. Okay. Now these, typically you have 3 phalanges in each finger with the exception of the thumb and your big toe or the great toe. Okay. Your thumb only has a distal and a proximal. Distal, remember distant means away from the point of attachment. So distal is towards the ends. Proximal is where your fingers attach. So your thumb actually only has proximal and distal. Now the rest of your fingers have proximal up closest to your hand, okay? And then the middle one is that middle section, and then your distal phalanges is your fingertips, like the ones that has your fingerprints on them and your fingernails on them. That's your distal phalanges, okay? So proximal, middle, distal. Those are phalanges, and the toes will be the same way. I think I'll just stop there for now. We'll pick up with the feet in the next video.